And what a great,
Amazing,
yeah,
amazing life. And so many of our colleagues are coming together because we're part of that same tribe,
yeah,
meant to not only to survive the transition into the Aquarian age, but at the same time to make an impact to all the digital media that is now available for us to. For those who are ready, they're going to hear us and they're going to make changes. They're going to take the needed action steps. And those of you who are hearing this for the first time, you also will find that you have been already pre-selected. You're here for a reason. And hopefully this investment with some of the ideas that was part of the presentation is going to lead to ever increasing. Like if we invested 2 hours, it'll give you 2 million hours of new life form because this is a longevity education, longevity and quality of life and
yes.
happiness and emotional poise. So go for it. Follow you, follow and be the greatest that you can ever be because you can do it. All you have to do is believe in yourself and just keep listening to nothing, stillness, and that will talk to you and it'll educate you.
Welcome to Humor the Boomer. My name is Brian Jansen. What follows is the first of a series of interviews I did with Viktoras Kulvinskas at his home on the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, the famous blue zone known for longevity. And this was made more poignant by Victor's recent unexpected passing due to complications from a fall. When I saw him less than a year ago, this guy was doing full lotus handstands and had a personal trainer, and his skin looks better than mine. And the guy was in great shape. He had been tested for his biological age, and at 86, he tested at 40. So the guy was in great shape. However, a fall, complications, ended up taking him out here at the end of last year. So this first interview is his origin story. And having been born in 1939 in Lithuania, and, by the time he was 2, the Nazis were rolling through on his way to becoming a refugee. Unbelievable trauma before he was 7 years old. And what really struck me after watching this again is the quality of his spirit, his resilience, his courage, his willpower, and how he took himself, his self-created master, took himself out of horrible circumstance and trauma and created a remarkable life of contribution and service. So there's more of this coming. Please like and subscribe. There's contact information and other things at the end of this video, including a freebie on how to do microgreens, which is sort of the latest iteration of live food, raw food that the youngins are doing. And I hope you enjoy this and it inspires you as it has me. Thank you.
I am delighted to be here with my friend and mentor of 40 years, Viktoras Kulvinskas. And what a treat to be here in the blue zone of Costa Rica and enjoying the weather and the wonderful food and company of you and Robert. And thank you for hosting me and taking the time to do this. I just have so many questions for you and so many things that I'm really interested to learn about. So thank you, Victor.
Well, likewise, always a learning experience. If you engage in transmission or channeling, the channel learns as much as the audience because they are often experiencing and exploring new realities, which they often have never thought about it, but yet it's coming through this interlude. So we're going to have a good time together. And what I would like to do is, as a kind of preliminary, first of all, it's been a long journey, practically 40 years since Parksville, New York, where we ended up meeting. We had a great adventure there. Oh my God, all kind of crisis, catastrophes, psychedelic mushrooms, fasting. I mean, it was a entry level to the beginning of the new age, as one would say, at least that particular cycle on planet Earth. And now here we are in a blue zone, Costa Rica, and my travels has taken me far and wide, from Siberia-like weather to the tropics, which is 80, it's around 77 degrees year round. So it's quite a transmission. I was born not in Siberia, but in Lithuania, which is pretty similar weather. During the winters, we had up to 6 and 8 feet of snow. We had to dig tunnels between our barns and our homes, and open up the smoke so we could get out of our chimneys. We were barefooted.
Oh,
We created all our clothing. We had no electricity. We also grew all our food. It was all organic. A 20-acre, 200-acre farm right in a floodplains. Our grains were grown with full spectrum minerals. So we had powerful, you might say, superfoods, because minerals determine the genetic makeup of the food, and the genetic makeup of the food determines the final out on the consumer. So we were very blessed in a sense.
right. You've talked a lot about the importance of minerals, and you're saying that the depleted minerals in our food currently are actually collapsing the human genome.
Totally, the facial features quickly recognized. There's a science called physiognomy in China, over 5,000 years old, and the ears are great indicators of the strength of and the detoxability, and
The
also
earlobe in particular.
earlobes of the human ear. So, like mines are considered long, but that was 35 years ago, 30 years ago. The Department of Agriculture brought into congressional records that 95% of Americans were deficient in one or more minerals. And basically, at that time, of course, the people previous to that generation were all grown on full spectrum of minerals. The soil was rich. America was one of the richest continents in the world. So we were very fortunate. But over every generation, poor quality farming, scientific farming has diluted. So now what we have every generation from 1966, it was 25% of our children were suffering from old age diseases. Now, now we go over 2024, 54% of our children are suffering from old age diseases, and a majority of them are on some form of medication, and they've been
Right.
vaccinated. Like I've had one vaccine. Like, let's go back to my childhood overall.
Right, because you had good genes and a good environment in a way, but it
Yeah.
was also the timing was kind of rough. You were born in '39 as the Nazis were invading Poland.
That's correct. And then Germans were also occupying Lithuania. They were doing mass killings, mass graves, and we could hear da 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 killing
Oh,
or knifing. And then as we were escaping, we were in a bunker, allowing the war to pass through. A German soldier came to our bunker, and he said basically either get out, or we're dropping grenades into each bunker. So we receded with the Germans, and eventually ended up in displaced people camps. I was age 5. But prior to that, in Lithuania, I had a whole series of, you might say, events that I pre-planned in my pre-birthing phase, because we all orchestrate our life history. In a sense, we're the choreographers of our life, wanting certain kind of life experiences. I was very interested in pain and suffering, obviously, but that brought me into study of everything imaginable, so that I ended up studying just everything from science, theoretical mathematics, the quantum field, computer sciences, as well as also medicine. And so and not only intellectual but mechanical. I learned construction, I learned plumbing, electricity. Everything was open. I was interested in everything. But at the start, I had zero brain power, because what happened was, at the age of 3, they had me inoculated. I don't know if it was for yellow fever or some other kind of stuff. And became autistic. I went in a coma for 3 weeks, fever, and the doctor told my mother he'll be lucky to survive. into his teenage years. Well, interesting enough, I did survive in that coma, and I was also affected mentally and emotionally, and as well as also physiologically, so that it completely destroyed my immune system and all that. So my brain basically, well, a lot of other things happened that contributed to that. Basically, emotional overwhelmment was one of a lot of emotional stress. You know,
And how long were you?
dysfunctional families were altogether very common. I was at that time 3 years old.
Right.
And
Oh, okay. And how long was the coma? You were in a coma?
I said 3 weeks over
3 weeks.
there. Basically, I survived it, and but my eyes were compromised. So left eye, could hardly see, and the right eye, I had barely very weak vision, and I would bump into things and fall and stuff like that. And my mental faculties were shut down because I think my mother was under an emotional storm because of my papa was kind of a womanizer, and he after he gave, well, she was very jealous, so all that anger and everything was in her breast milk. I rejected breast milk by the age of 2 weeks. I refused to drink it, and basically, anger storms were raging continuously from mother and father. So I was continuously in a fight flight mode. So indigestion was rampant, and with indigestion ran also sourness and destruction. Sourness and food became acidic. So now I started having early history of acidic diseases. The first phase was weakness. The second phase was migraine headaches. The third phase was sciatic pain. By the time I was 7, I was getting OPAs shot up my butt and stuff like that by the doctor.
And all this was happening in the context of war.
Oh yeah, but
So,
the wars was very interesting. But finishing up the second, that was my first 3 weeks of basically being in coma. Then and we used to get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And people started work at that time, so I was instructed to go to the barn. I went over to the barn and I bumped into one of the workers, and he was sharpening a sickle, and it dropped and opened up a 14-inch cut on my leg all the way from knee to ankle. So I'm bleeding profusely. My father's screaming like hell. People from the house barn, they heard at home, they heard it, they came over. My grandmother ended up running back into the house, getting her sewing kit. She sewed me up, poured much alcohol in my legs, down my mouth, over there. And I went into a second coma. This one lasted 4 weeks, complete fever and everything. But like I said, I had very strong genetics, so I survived that one. So now I'm very debilitated, and here we are now forced to leave Lithuania. And during the leaving, I mean, we're being shot by, first of all, by the Germans. We were retreating with the German front, and the Americans were shooting at us from the airplanes, and the Russians were shooting at us with their tanks, and people are dropping dead all around you, and and you keep jumping into bunkers, and the whole earth is shaking. And the funny thing is, my life was fixed. I had no fear or anything like that. It didn't bother me one way or another. I just went through the whole drama, as it was happening. So we finally managed to, nobody got killed out of our tribe, and we managed to get to displaced people camps, and that's where, the second journey. But a couple other things that happened in Lithuania was sexual abuse. That was kind of a minor event, but it left track marks on my. The 4 symptoms of sexual abuse children were very evident after I started studying personal psychology. I knew that I had to, because I had very, number one, I had blanks in memory, and secondly, my memory was so, since I was isolated and raised like a wolf child, so I had hardly any input from society. So I was blessed not getting inculcated by the garbage, the lies. 99% of the stuff you learn from your society are lies, and they just ignorance and stupidity. I mean, this is a truism. When you start diving deeper, and that's what started happening, is it's like layers of an onion. You keep peeling away the garbage, and finally you find that there's nothing there except Godhood, and that's where I connected with in my second phase of my life. But anyways, so there I was subject to also tremendous inculcation into the fearful religion of Catholicism, and that was like first time I experienced was really a funny situation. they took me to church. Now, I never seen lights or anything like that. We had candles only, and or electricity. So everybody's standing in the church, and it's cold, and basically, and I'm standing next to something like a statue with a cross like that. And some guys on there, I couldn't see make out or anything like that. The lights go on. It scared the hell out of me. This guy with big sad look on his face. He's got thorns on his head, bleeding all over. What the hell am I doing here? Then the priest starts telling us that we're all sinners, we're worthless, we're not worth anything, all gonna go to hell unless we come to the church. I says, this is not for me, but I just kind of moved on. So that was my early introduction. But the second introduction now to another version of Jesus the love. And when we went to displaced people's camp, there was no fancy statues or anything like that or crosses. It was simple. A room that was, and a priest was telling about this soldier of God who was, here to save us, and he shared love and all that. And I started thinking about this, and I always spent my time alone, either beating up other people. I was very angry, very aggressive. All I wanted to was to die, because there was just nothing worthwhile. So I died twice, and then I died again at 7. At 7, I was drowning in the Elbe River and going down for the fourth time. And I experienced this wonderful kind of a whirling energy of beautiful colors and the most beautiful music imaginable. And I was in a state of bliss. But then someone pulled me out and brought me on the shores, and they did some pumping. I never knew who it was, but many years later, Father told me that it was him that pulled me out. Anyways, I was with him at the river.
So you were 7 at the time.
Yeah.
And you'd already had
3 death experiences.
3 before you, and they say the Jello sets at 7 years old. So you were in a refugee camp at this point?
For 5 years.
Oh, from when to when?
From 5 to 10, and then we came to America.
Well, let me ask you just a couple things about the comas in particular, because,
Sure.
and you mentioned that you'd had this vaccine and it had the effect
Inoculation, which is a vulgar form of vaccination.
and this gave you you had an autistic response to this. Now, I don't know if you've run into this, but they're coming out with research now that autistic people have remarkable psychic and intuitive abilities.
Well,
And I got to believe that you were journeying on the inner planes in these comas. And I just wonder if you could talk about that, because you've been a mystic.
There was actually no memory of anything during the comas. And the only thing I remember during the drowning was going into a state of bliss. But outside the comas, there was none. But that's where the Jesus comes in. When I started telling you about Jesus at the age of around 7, when I went to listen to this preacher, I ended up getting blissed out by this wonderful idea of love, because I didn't know love. All I knew was fear. You got choice. Like in Course of Miracles, they talk about there's only 2 primary emotions, love and fear. Well, I lived in a state of fear. All of a sudden, I started feeling this love, and I ended up for hours and hours going to the state of bliss. And then tears were rolling out, and then I went into nirvana. And at that point, I started having, I went on for hours. I was in a closet all up by myself, and just blissing out like crazy at 7. So after that, I started hearing people's thoughts and stuff like that, and I started experiencing a little differently. But I didn't start speaking till I was about 16, and I could only speak in 2 to 4 word sentences. And even I had a limited vocabulary, because my brain neurological density was so small in volume. And even right now, it takes tremendous amount of discipline and exercise to develop my brain capacity. And you can imagine someone who's autistic, and often they don't expect much from them. I ended up being a college teacher in theoretical mathematics. I worked for Smithsonian on Baker non-camera station, basically developing the geographical locations and magnetic fields of the Earth. I worked with Smithsonian, and then I worked with basically an Apollo project, developing the language. I just went on. I kept breaking cutting edge. And that was all connecting with the source. I surrendered to the source my life, in a sense, thought I was still a very passionate sinner. So I went through addictions of every imaginable kind. But and I still right now it's gotten to the point where at 86, basically I'm a very nice person. Instead of kind of aspiring to be a serial killer, I'm aspiring to be a sage saint. It's kind of a difference in orientations because I studied psychology and serial killers, and I had all the views of becoming one. But thank God, my second connection after Jesus, I saw things kind of got a little different, but I still was just totally in a nun situation. Like I said, it was 16 when I started trying to carry on conversation, and the only reason was the sexual drive was arising, and I would have been considered a rapist if approaching a woman with just grab and shit like that. So you had to talk. So I was trying to learn a little bit. So I was memorizing Ovid, the Greek philosopher's love poetry.
Okay, so Jesus and love and sex were big motivations for you.
Oh, it's for everybody. It's the primary drive,
Well,
and being a reborn Christian. Look at what happens to these people. They break up addiction. They go through a whole life transformation.
but you, just to back up a little bit, you were 10 years old when your family immigrated, but
But when it came to USA, yeah.
when you came to the USA, but you were not speaking at that time, so you spent your first 6 years in the US nonverbal.
No, totally. I was a fighter. Anything, if anybody talked badly about Jesus, I beat the shit out of them. In fact, I protected my sisters. I was always in fist fights, and even when no one was bothering, I would be aggressive, totally myself as an individual. And that went on till the age of about 17. Then I discovered that I had a mind that I could train it, and that was the second experience of connecting with now, not with Jesus, but connecting with the source of all sources. It made me a sorcerer, you might say. And that was, I saw in my face, I was aging rapidly. By 16, I had deep lines across the forehead, liver lines. I had bags under my eyes. And I was insomniac. I was drinking. The only thing that made me happy was coffee. And basically, because it created, coffee is an alkaloid, just like all the other opiates are, in a sense. So temporarily, they neutralized the acidic condition, which was predominant in myself. So all of a sudden, my brain was operating at a certain level of improved capacity, as well as also my physical improved. So I would be drinking coffee all day, but that created insomnia. And I said to myself, the only conclusion I could draw, I said, I got to find out how to fall asleep because it's killing me. At 16, I drew the conclusion that I'm aging so rapidly in relationship to everyone else, and I was spitting mucus all the time. I was so good I could hit even a quarter size with my spitting because I was filled with so much mucus. I was consuming dairy products to help neutralize my acidity. Of course, I was doing this instinctually. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So it was, and I would have 6 to 8 colds a year because that was a healing crisis, getting rid of the mucus because I still had a strong constitution. So, but so with 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 my alkalinity and in not being able to sleep, I discovered by the time I was 15 museums. So I would go to museums all the time. And then I discovered there was a library next to the museum. So I went to the library and I started looking at books and I started learning different things. Not very well, but I became incentivized by what's going on. And but I didn't learn anything. Instead, I used to spend a lot of time in the forest or hanging out with dogs and cats. And I noticed that they didn't sleep. I thought they didn't sleep. They rested. I said, FK. I says, I don't need to sleep. I'm going to rest. So that's where it took me into Savasana. Savasana, I started practicing at night. Instead, I'm not going to worry about getting sleep. Instead, I would go to bed 9, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, and I would be until 2, 3, 4 o'clock, not falling asleep. So I started doing deep level of relaxation. I kept innovating, getting better and better. I started floating. Then I started developing astral travel, so I'd be able to leave my body, where I removed the gravitational field between
No.
physical and astral body, and basically, and then I started concentrating because my mind was still chattering. So I had to shut off my mind. So I decided instead of listening to only one topic, and then I said, that's not working either. I'm going to listen to the sound of my breath. And that sound over there was now I started getting into stillness and it became more and more amplified. I continued to review my physical body. So it was relaxed and I'm focusing on my mindset. And all of a sudden, the sound started amplifying and I started hearing a high C note, and I started writing with the high C note, and it became so loud that it went into the light, and I passed out, and I would fall asleep. Well, within 6 months, I one morning I woke up and basically I woke up so well rested and I felt like I had something to say, and I didn't have the words. So I got a piece of paper, notebook, and I started writing. And I wrote 4-page poem about basically the chakras, what would be known as about, and also the powers of each chakra. And I didn't know what the hell that
Okay,
was all
so
about. It was all about these light centers, 7 light centers.
because you'd experienced them,
Yeah,
and
so
so you had no training in meditation or
no,
chakras.
nothing
This
whatsoever.
was all your inner journey.
Yeah, so it was an inner journey, and then all of a sudden, I started changing my friends instead of being people who were criminals and lower class. I started associating with middle class, upper middle class. I started interested in academics, and all of a sudden, my freshman year, I still was working. Like I started working at 11, first potato farm, then working at a tobacco farm. Then my grandmother got me a job as a caretaker. At 11, I started working as a janitorial service. At 13, I was working at the same time in a grocery boy, and then at 15, and 14 and 15, I worked in a bakery, and I continued to work in a bakery weekends. And so I was working. They kept me out of trouble. All of a sudden, they pulled me out of a destructive environment. So, when I was working in a grocery store, I had a lot of free time. I would do the jobs quickly, and then we had to memorize Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice, and I never tried memorizing. And I said maybe I'm going to try it. I kept working at it. In about a month, I memorized Shakespeare, quite a great deal of it, and we were forced in our class to write the Shakespeare. And the teacher knew me only as a cheater. I just cheated in everything that I did, and I wrote out that I was the first one, and I turned it over. She started slapping the hell out of me
Oh
and says,
no!
dare you cheat? You think you're going to get away with it? So I proceeded to recite the Shakespeare. The quality of mercy is not strained, that section. And it was funny. But that kind of started the revolt. I dived into mathematics and I started studying all the time. So even while driving a car, I always had a book with me, either geometry, trigonometry, or memorizing. Even when driving a car, I had little clip cars, or when I went in a factory, like I would exercise my brain by taking like 234 multiplying by 27 or 278, and it would take 8 hours the
Oh,
full day. But because there's a way, it's a whole calculus of multiplication that you can do it, but it takes a lot. So it exercise. So I stopped
right.
wasting time and I started exercising my brain.
So
So it just kept improving, like so. But without, if I became lazy, then my brain slumped out again. So it was kind of a continuous ever struggle.
I want to ask you about that. So in your classic introduction to your classic book, Survival into the 21st Century, you talked about going into testing situations where you hadn't studied, but you were able to open up to the field of knowledge and do great on the tests, just by accessing the information directly. Was this during that period? Was this,
Yeah, well, that
how did that work? What was your experience of that? How did that work?
primarily it was the fact that I was I started studying electrical engineering, and I was one of four people that survived the first 5 years and 5 semesters. And then I saw that that was not the future for me because you would only get 2 week vacation or 3 week vacation. I wanted freedom in my life, so I convinced my mother because it was life and death situation to let me become a mathematician, which I would teach. So I would have 4 months at least of vacation time to study everything I wanted to. So to be involved in my personal pursuits. So she okayed it. So, anyways, during my studies, I became interested in a lot of other things besides mathematics and nuclear physics. And I ended up diving into theories of personality, aesthetics, philosophy, psychology. I became involved in sculpture. I was doing sculpture. My photography was so good that when I was 18, actually, my photo of President Eisenhower that I shot of him from a tall building was on a cover of basically Hartford Times newspaper Sunday edition. So it was fantastic photo. He was just waving, and stuff like that. Just got his face and everything. And I knew that I did all the dark room. So I dived into a lot of other things at the same time. And I hardly ever slept. So I was caffeinated. Well, sometimes I drank as many as 10 cups of coffee a day. I was just kind of living on the edge, but like a strong constitution. But you do a lot of burning. You can't rely on that. And so, anyways, so I ended up being in theoretical mathematics, and that's very demanding academically. And I was hanging out with the fine arts crowd. I mean, I never hung out with any of the mathematicians. I hung out with people who were creative artists, musicians, artists, theater, and all that kind of stuff. And so when exams came around, often I was behind them a week, month, and I never wanted to. I never allowed myself to fail my mother. My mother had great expectations out of me, and it was totally unfounded, but she still did. And anyway, so I couldn't fail her. I said, so for me, it was always life and death. So I was willing to risk that. So like one time, I stayed up for 8 days without sleep. All I drank was water and sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acidity that was generated. And I did the corpse pose twice a day for 20 minutes. Just dive into an astral field and feel like floating, and that was substituted for sleep. I had no bad side effects, and meditated, and at the same time studied. So by the third day, I would develop photographic memory, and I just would study pretty much 20 to 24 hours a day, and then basically, and as other subjects I didn't study, I would just basically get into the belief. Like give you an example, I was taking tensor theory, which is very advanced kind of infinite field theoretical mathematics, so infinite spaces, and 2 months not being in class, and they had a take-home exam, and I couldn't understand any of the questions, but instead I looked up the words, found out the meanings of the question. Then I got into lucid dreaming, what might be referred to, which is basically getting into a state of all knowing. And before I went, I understood the question. And in the morning, I just barely woke up. I had already my piece of paper, my papers lined up and a pencil. I wrote out a 10-page dissertation. I was the only one that had it correct. See, this is very similar to what Edison used to do, except he was much sharper in a sense. What he would do is do this kind of state initiated 6, 8 times a day. Like what he would do is have this heavy object that he would hold in his hands, lay down in a sofa, and would fall asleep. And when he would fall asleep, that he would be already in that state of delta, and it would drop. The hands would loosen, and that heavy object dropped on metal plate, and it would wake him up, and he would immediately start writing about all his ideas.
Oh, I did not know that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, technique.
Well, yeah, he was one of these again. The psychic, just the same way, like I was born psychically in a sense. My birth is actually was born on a cusp of basically triple twos and 23. And 23 is basically because I carry both attributes. Triple twos, it means you have extremely psychic abilities, whereas with 23 I had only two twos. With 23 I had three twos. And in numerology, that's indication, you have basically extremely ability to enter into that sacred space with greatest of ease. So I started becoming more and more as I learned how to relax, so I can get into just channeling at any.
I have thought about your birthday of February 23rd, that you're right on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces,
Yeah.
which in some sense you're someone who's helping us in that cusp, from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age.
Well, this is taking us from from being in a of the love state, but not becoming. And Aquarian age is the age of becoming, or in other words, what Jesus said. Words are empty, action is everything. Well, that's all we have is words. Just take a look at our time and space. Nothing but violence, hatred between people, clans, and everywhere. Love is very rare, and the main reason is because everybody's in a state of fear as they're consuming slaughtered animals. The animals in slaughterhouses, basically what they do is emit basically fear hormones, and the hormones are consumed, and people experience fear hormones. I did some research with pancreatic enzymes that were based on animal pancreas from the pig and also from beef, and basically I saw myself just totally in a state of fear when I consumed those the next day. So I experienced it fully myself, and I looked at studies that were done. It's published in Schizophrenia Review. I include that in my book, Survival in the 21st Century. And it's stated in Schizophrenia Review, Moscow Psychiatric Institute did over 40 years of studies basically treating all forms of mental disorders, including schizophrenia, panic attack, depression, and all of it through basically a combination of liquid program for 3 weeks and exercise 3 hours a day. And when they were relieved, 85%, even schizophrenia was relieved, basically, majority of the cases. When they went back to normal eating patterns, all the crazies returned in a sense because of the animal. Whereas they stayed on a vegan diet, the fear was gone, completely new module. And this is taught taught in Bhagavad Gita in a sense, where they talk about sattvic diet. It's the diet of spirituality and mental giants.
Well, also interestingly, Dr. David Palmer, who is a very
the chiropractic school.
no, this is somebody else. This is a guy who's a Harvard research psychiatrist, I believe. He works at the top, I think, McLean Hospital, and he has demonstrated now that even the most intractable mental illnesses can be affected by diet. And he's working with ketosis and the different instead of instead of sugar burning, getting the body into a fat burning.
Fat burning is a good direction, but it's not the ultimate direction because you're much better off burning fats, carbs, and protein. And the reason he's doing it like that is because he doesn't understand enzymology. Because most people have cravings for sugar, and the brain disorders that go with sugar is because they have burned out by the time they hit mid 30s, according to Dr. Sumner of Institute of Traumatology. And he's also basically author of a book called Enzymes: The Secret of Life. You can find all these quotes. 95% of Americans by mid-age, they have lost their ability to digest simple carbs. And according to Cardiology Journal 2023, they showed that 93% of Americans Americans are metabolically inflexible, which means they can't digest even their own shit. No, excuse me, they can't digest fats, proteins, or starches. That's where we're right now up Schitt's Creek in a sense, because enzymes are practically non-existent. That's why people are having all these old age diseases instead of in their 60s and 70s, they're having it in their 20s. And the Hippocrates has to do, three generations ago, it was people in their 60s and 70s. Right now, it's in our 20s with Crohn's, colitis, cancer, cardiovascular disease, you name it. So, he's got a little bit of, I call it the progress on Palmer. Congratulations. But he's got nowhere anywhere close to the whole truth. Because no, I haven't. I listen to all kind of medical journals, and I find all of them so deficient and so filled with so many incomplete truths because they don't understand how the human body operates, how all the systems interrelate, how cancer is a survival mechanism that enables you to live under asphyxiation, and it enables to extend your life, according to Alexis Carrel, Nobel Prize winner, in his book Man the Unknown. He states very clearly the human body adapts, its innovation adapts because it's an intelligent entity filled with trillions of entities that have intelligence, and they coordinate and come up with solutions, basically to let you survive under very threatening environment. And basically, so he says the body innovates techniques to be able to basically to survive the experience, but at the same time compromising longevity and energy levels. And that's what's happening on an acidic diet, which is practically 100% of the people are on strictly acidic diet. The only thing that is alkaline is raw vegetables and some of the fruit. Everything else is acidic, and of course distilled water and sprouts and sea vegetables. These are all alkaline. But people are just drinking nothing but acid beverages, and what it's doing, your body's an electrical system. Your energy voltage continues to diminish. Like I might have slim structure, but at 75, I 400 push-ups in 11 minutes over there in sets of 50s. Basically, what the hell does that kind of stuff? And because it's alkaline diet. Alkaline diet, all your cells, you got over 60 trillion of cells. Each one of them are tiny little batteries. The cytoplasm is alkaline, the nucleus is acid, and they generate electro voltage maximum up to 1.5 volts. You could have over 150 million to trillion volts generated within your system, and that's what the great sages, like for instance the pharaohs, who ended up like Jesus said. He says that time will come, and he didn't realize about the pharaohs, but a time will come when these masters, he says, these greater than I, when they speak to the mountain will listen. It tells the mountain to move, the mountain will move. The mountain will reshape according to their mental images, and that's how they build the pyramids in a sense. So your mindset over there is not only mind. That's why this acidic diet that people are on, their brain is completely compromised. They're working at such low level of capacity. They're basically in a brain fog all the time. Acidic, and it's one of the great things that is acidifying is indigestion due to lack of enzymes. And indigestion is caused, among other reasons besides lack of enzymatic nutrition, it's also stress. Because when you're under stress, your body's enzymes that normally would be in digestion, they're relocated to fight, flight, where they go into the arms, into your legs, into your trunk, in order to carry on basically action or to go into stillness, hoping that no one is going to bite a dead body. So, anyways, it's body electrovoltage. Give you an example. Dan O'Brien. Okay, I worked with him many years ago when I was consultant to the Celtech, basically product development. I know I was developing the products for them. Basically, in enzymology, they didn't have enzymes before that. So Dan O'Brien, basically, he was an average athlete. He had pretty good capacity. Was internationally competing in track and basically, but he couldn't work out more than 1 hour a day. We put him on digestive enzymes with meals and between meals, blue green algae, which was about 100 times more alkaline than water. And blue-green algae that's harvested in Klamath Lake, Oregon, and then also probiotics, which just run the whole gamut of your GI tract health, which is like primarily they're the number one citizens. And you've got to learn how to feed your probiotics. And there's an excellent book that's worth reading. It's called Five Fuel by Dr. Will Bolshevitz. So coming back to Dan O'Brien, so we put him on these three products. 5 weeks later, he's working out 6 to 8 hours a day. Okay, 6 to 8 hours. He pre-qualifies for Olympics in decathlon, which is the hardest category because it requires so many different stuff.
Right,
He
right.
competes with men 10 years younger than him. Comes home with gold in every one of the categories. That's what realkalizing can do in a sense, and re-enzymizing and remicrobial. He ended up submitting to University of Illinois School of Medicine an article that was prepared by a whole group of doctors at South-Tech. And basically, the article was entitled 200 cases of incurables treated in 4 months successfully with superfood. They recovered, including emphysema. It recovered. The woman was on 15 years on oxygen units, medication, everything. Within 4 months, she was climbing mountains with any of that stuff. So superfoods, proper, when they're whole foods and well chosen, they can make a radical difference. And you don't require 20 or 30 of them, 100 different pills. Now, if you understand how the human body works, then you'll find how simple it is to create, but very few people understand because it calls not only diving deep within, but also basically just kind of finding the solutions from the source. Because so, like my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, 4 supplements within 5 weeks. Doctor said she'll never walk and she'll never get over her condition. 5 weeks later, she's out of bed. Blue green algae, probiotic, systemic digestive enzymes, and a mild herbal laxative.
So
That was it.
the four things I've heard you bring forward so far are minerals.
Well, the minerals of the blue green algae are found in the lakes, Klamath Lake. So you got most of the minerals that you need. But yeah,
But you supplement with dulse and other.
well, those are mineral sources, and
see,
pretty high in also iodine and other essentials that drive your metabolism.
So just to make sure I'm hearing you right, so I'm hearing minerals, I'm hearing probiotics, I'm hearing enzymes, and I'm hearing alkalinization.
Which would be the greens. Like in Ezekiel, it says greens are for healing. Every one of us, including I am, we're all sick. We're all sick, breathing, severely polluted air. Number one cause of death right now is air quality. And that's been happening within the last 5 years. And basically, in developing Alzheimer's, everybody's going stupid because they're breathing aluminum boron that is being spread by Geoengineering Watch podcast. You can listen 15 years of history of the whole mess up of our environment. It basically, you might say there's a transition period, and this is something that every one of us got to realize. And this is the intention of this podcast that we're going to be, or whatever we're going to call this, we're going to be creating, is to help you to survive the crisis, and you choose the reality you want to live in. You have come here with a mission. Not, a lot of people have come here just to hang out, and they're going to go the way of, you might say, I have a saying, which is, and I can qualify it without doing it at this time, but birth is hell, and entering into the birth, I mean, there's hundreds of reasons why it is hell for most people, 90%, 95%, because you just don't have the loving, you're not wanted by one or more of the parents, you're vaccinated, you're polluted, you're eating, mother's parents are watching violence, television, and all kind of stuff. They're programmed with insanity, and at the same time, life, according to Buddha, is suffering. That's for most people, it's stressed out life, and I call death is entry into paradise. So don't worry. I mean, don't be. The thing to do is not to fear death, instead to learn how to love life, and whatever length of time you're going to be living, that's cool, and make it count. So start becoming alive. with all your sensory data, with all your abilities. Start challenging yourself every day, like in Alice in Wonderland. If I can't do, if I can't innovate and come up with at least half a dozen things that were at one time thought to be impossible, basically, I should start the day once again because, we were meant for greatness. But most of you think you're meant to be bunch of jobs, broke at some position that you don't care. That's why, according to sociological studies, on Monday at 9 a.m. you have the highest death rate from heart attacks. Because the reason is you're going to job that you don't give a shit about. Instead of following your truth, one thing I always followed is my heart, no matter what risk it meant. I dropped out of a profession. I was in the top game in the field of basically systemic programming, and we were designing systems in the 60s. I dropped out. I left. You know, Everybody said I was crazy, and I joined a cult called Rising Sun Christianity and Wigmores. I took the vows not because Anne asked me. I took the vows of chastity, penury, and service, and I surrendered to the source. I says, "Use me." That was
And what year was that that you?
19, 1969.
Okay, so let's take a short break here for a second, and then we'll pick up the Ann Wigmore part of the story.
Yeah, that was an interesting period
Let's
in my life.
let's take a quick break here and come back in just a couple. Okay. So Ann Wigmore, this is a name that figures large, and I'd just love to hear that story. How you met her and got ordained in that tradition. Sounds like a Christian-based tradition.
Unity Church, she was initiated into that, which was a good choice.
Yeah, and how did you come to meet her?
Well, it started off with Dr. Norman Walker. He's the first one in the natural field that contacted. Well, before him was Dr. Warmbrand, who was a gastroenterologist, naturopath doctor. He got me started a little bit on his style of vegan diet, which was pretty crappy, but introduced me to the power of bathtub and salt. So putting in 3 pounds of kosher salt in a bathtub, soaking for an hour and more, and basically with that, I was able. First night after a soak, taking a shower, after that soak, basically I slept 9 hours, which I haven't done that forever.
And so that was because of it pulled the acidity out and helped
right.
you equilibrate in an alkaline state.
Yeah.
3 pounds.
And then one time years later, I had extreme sciatica pain, and it was like knives all the way down my right leg. So I ended up diving into the bathtub. I stayed over 20 hours, and basically, and first 6 hours, no change in pain. Then it started getting less and less, and that was probably in 1978 or so. And never to come back to sciatica pain. Just pulled out all this acidity. I did with other clients who were using a cane instead of. I knew nobody's going to soak 28 hours or 20 hours, so I came up with another direction. Which what they would do is create a saturated solution in a little tub of water, soak a little towel, and put it on the buttocks, and then wrap. And then what they do is use that wrap around plastic and
Yes.
and wrapped it all around.
You'd saran wrap yourself.
And they do it for 4 hours for 6 days. Complete the guy in one from walking with a cane to completely pain free, and he was in his late 70s, and he was also into 3-4 hours over exercising. So he just
Okay, to be clear though, this is just a towel soaked in salt water?
very strong salt.
Very strong salt.
It's called super saturated, so that it starts precipitating out the salt. You can't dissolve any more than what you have in that bowl.
And how much, let's say you had a gallon of water, how much salt could it absorb?
I don't know, it would be probably maybe a couple of cups, basically. But what you do is just keep dissolving it. Depends on your temperature and everything.
Right.
And once once you can't dissolve, it starts precipitating. You got enough,
Right.
and I mean, it was amazing.
I love it. That's wonderful.
So
Yeah. So back to Ann Wigmore and the start. So you started with, you said Dr. Walker?
yeah, so and then Walker had told me, he says, I don't do any counseling. I wanted to meet up with him, and
Oh.
he says I'm into only doing research. And so he said, try Ann Wigmore. She's in Boston, and already I was living in Boston, Arlington, working in the computer industry. So I didn't do it. About a couple of months later, I used to read Boston Globe, and on parade section there was a cover of Twiggy. Twiggy was like the big skinny model, the perfect model for
Right.
that time. So she was at the end Wigmore's to detoxify. They had a 4-page spread on her. I said, "Shit, that sounds interesting. So bizarre and different." So I decided eventually, when I experienced my own this separation from the computer industry, I told them I was going to go on sabbatical for a year and then I'll come back. So that was the end of it.
1969, you said?
Yeah, 69. So I ended up, going over at Ann. She charged $60 a week. Of course, she had that whole place for free um, Margaret Drumheller was the owner of that. She was a celebrity woman, and Anna kind of schmoozed herself, and she was kind of groomed by Fred Gardenheimer, who was her lover at that time, and basically schmoozed into kind of how to deal with you might say the upscale individuals in order to become part of them. So she ended up kind of forgetting, as they say, some people will get able to put a foot into a teepee. Next thing they do is own it. And then we were pulled off one of these. And that was an adventure in itself because they tried to assassinate. There was assassination attempts, kidnapping. I mean, it was all kind of trauma in a sense by evil forces who had the foundation who owned.
Wait, trying to assassinate Anne?
No, assassinate Fred. Fred. No, and he was a background. He was her lover boy, and he was 30 years older than her. He was vegan all his life, and he was the right hand man for Margaret for basically the founder of the Christian Science Church, basically, uh, and for so many other leading personalities. He just enjoyed being a background. He was a lawyer and basically so he was on a board of directors of a foundation that starts with an S, which I don't want to mention, in Washington D.C. There was a lawyer and a naturopath doctor on it. They were swindling huge funds that the foundation had every year. So he found out, and he was going to get some of that money to buy the Hippocrates building. So this was it was middle of winter. He went over for the yearly annual meeting, and he was all this information was brought to him by this woman Moon, who was the secretary for that foundation. So she relayed to Fred all this garbage, and so they basically almost killed her, left her in the snow to die. She became blind from that experience.
Oh,
And Fred was he was coming home on a train, and they kidnapped him in Boston. 3 guys jumped him over there, threw him in a vehicle. They took him up to Rhode Island National Park, basically, and left him in the middle of winter. And he had only a jacket to freeze up. But he was a robust, big man like you over there, robust, strong man. And he ended up calling me on a payphone that I had collect. So I just happened to be there, and we figured out where he was. So I rescued. After that, Ann Woodmore had nothing to do with that, but she already ended up signing a deal with Margaret Drumheller, so she acquired the payments.
I'm impressed by the interplay of dark and light
Oh
here.
God, yes. Then Steve Zorro, and then when Fred died, he was died in his late 90s. I mean, he would go out and hang out with Paul Dudley White, MD, the President Eisenhower's doctor, and basically hang out, drink coffee, and have toast in the mornings and talk about world events, about every kind of, you can imagine two great minds getting together. They would do that.
Sure. Yeah.
So, anyways, he walked up the 5 flights of stairs, laid down, and died, and he was gone.
Oh, man.
So,
Well, tell us a little bit about Anne Wigmore's journey. How did she get to the place where live food and vegan diet and this kind of thing?
was brought in by myself, and it came not me, but when I joined Ann Wigmore, she had a vegetarian diet, which included all kind. Like she would make 25 loaves of bread and put in wheatgrass chopped into it. They served butter or margarine. They served everyday stews. So it was not,
But she was using the wheatgrass and she was incorporating that into a kind of a vegetarian rather than vegan diet.
Yeah. No, basically, she was like a pioneer. She was
Yeah.
like we both joined. We knew nothing about anything. I dived into reading all the other. She didn't study everybody else. I studied everybody else besides Anne. So I mean, she just ended up kind of relying on biblical truths, and the Bible was, King Nebuchadnezzar healed himself of all kind of diseases, which is eating grasses like the oxen. And there's a lot of subtle messages in that which no one incorporated.
So this really came directly out of the Bible. It was very Christian, Bible based.
Exactly. Unity Church, and she wanted to be of service. Like that's her dharma. She was born April 3rd, and basically some say April 4th, 1909, but I believe basically from numerology that it was the third. She told me that she thought it was the third because they didn't keep accurate data on all that kind of stuff because if she was born on the 4th, she wouldn't have the line of greatness. And Anne Wigmore is right now. You can just Google Anne Wigmore, and you're going to find all kind of doctors quoting her right now. On the web. So and she developed the wheatgrass therapy and all that. And
and she was the first with all that, right?
she was the organizer, and I was the one that brought the stuff. Like I brought in seed cheese, and I brought in fermentation.
Now, how did you make that leap to live food, though? Because vegetarian is one thing, and
it came from Professor Edmond Sekeli, the head of the Sino Order. He was the one that channeled the teachings of Jesus, the Essene Gospel of Peace, and he spoke 15 languages, and he was born in Transylvania, and basically he ended up becoming. He was already basically a religious scholar, and he graduated out of high academies, and he got a job at the Vatican Library, and he discovered the Vatican had basically all these caves all over, and all these library shelves and shelves of books, scrolls, and he discovered the Essene scrolls. So he had photographic memory, so he would memorize that stuff. And the scenes were actually, which you can find out now more from Edgar Casey's channel, Jesus and the Scenes. There's a book that is entitled by that name because Jesus was part of the Essene community, and Jesus, by the time he was, according to the tradition of Edgar Casey, basically Jesus was basically born in a community. These three rabbis, astrologers, they did inverse astrology. They wanted to know when and where was the birth of the consciousness of the 2000 to 200-year cycle. We were going like through around 22,000 year cycles, and then there's the one. So they came up with that it was going to be in Qumran area, and also so they started a community. Basically, and they brought in very disciplined, very disciplined. They were vegans, raw, and then the Joseph and Mary, they came together and basically, and Mary was one of the 12 ladies chosen for giving birth to basically to this consciousness, and so she was, being brought through all kind of purification techniques and everything. And Jesus was born in that community, so he was already super master by the time he was 8 years old. And this is not at all unusual. There's a book written, Prenatal Origin of Genius, by Dr. Bernard. You can find it at Health Research, or you can look up on the Google something called it's called Little Hercules. Little Hercules, at 8 years old, he was finishing college, and basically, and he was raised again by vegan parents who ended up basically also training him on all the arts of physical, mental, emotional. So he had three black belts in martial arts. He could do every yoga posture, and he was master already at 8 years old. He could carry on dialogues, outwitting all these, people who thought they could make mincemeat out of this 8 year old.
Yeah.
He could handle dialogue on national television and radio. So he's still alive right now. He's involved in being a stuntman. I don't know what that was, the last I heard of it.
Little Hercules.
Yeah, Little Hercules.
Okay.
So basically, this is all a matter of a lot of right kind of parameters being brought together, because
Right.
what we give birth and what kind of stimulation. Like, there was in New York, in Newsweek magazine, an article, 1/3 page about Chinese family. They had three prodigies, and each one of them was in different fields. And basically, so they asked him, well, how did it come about? He says, we loved the child. We kept them always stimulated. So, as an example of stimulation, I was air, Spirit Air, and sitting next to me is a woman. She's got a 2 or 3 month baby, and silently she's singing to that child. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all the way through Sunday. And she'll repeat that half a dozen times. The next song she sings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She'll count up to 25. Then she'll sing January, February. She kept doing, already pre-programming the mental faculties, because that's how brain operates, has an analog that creates logic out of nonsense sounds, and basically creates order out of chaos. So that's how you end up frequent admonition, stuff that keeps coming in through our system, eventually ends up becoming incorporated into order, and you can, out of this chaos comes the evolution of language, where eventually all the noise. Right there now, I'm making noise. That's all the hell I'm doing right now with this tongue. But you guys, you can listen to me, to this noise, and it makes sense to you. You think that was originally when we were Cro-Magnon? No, sir. No, it was a long evolution of the whole development, and this has to do with microbial cultures, how they kept on reinventing. Remember, microbes can go through 1 trillion mutations in 24 hours. So they are able to, and they think everything in every form of life form, including crystal, which is life form, is basically it's a expression of the creator, any kind of density configuration of the three-dimensional world, and in it it has consciousness, and this consciousness, the more integrated, larger and larger it grows in sophistication, the larger its ability capacity. A good example is watching the evolution of Apple computer from its initial inception, which was a huge box where it could only operate with three different yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, just simple yes, no answer. It became the most sophisticated. Now the computer outthinks the human ability through the AI. So the same thing happens in the human organism and all life forms. So it's a matter of pre-programming. Like, if you want to learn rapidly new subject, you take the book, the subject you're going to study, and just go look at the page, flip next, look next, look next, until you go to the book. Flip it over, go backwards. Do that for 3 days, in the morning and evening. That's all. And then, if possible, if you can get an audio, you'll find that the book is already pre-programmed through repetition, because your body, through all the sensory data, the more different sensory data that's coming in through the message. So that's why, like when I used to study, I wrote down the important things always. I viewed it. I said it audibly and I repeated. And
Okay.
I repeated to a point where less and less meant more and more. And that's how I assimilated material. So there's a whole science of, operating this brain that you call, it's basically, human computer systems. And its abilities are determined by your mineral content, your alkalinity drives the electrical force, and also ability to have a quality, first of all, clearing out the brain, which you do that with systemic enzymes. They act like roto-rooter, cleaning out the blood vessels. You take it on an empty stomach, or just take any high proteolytic enzymes and it clean out the blood vessels on an empty stomach. All of a sudden, your brain starts functioning, spark plugging, becomes super functional. Like my brain went so many leaps over the years. I mean, I'm 86 and I'm much smarter right now than I ever been in a sense, and it continues to grow because use it or lose it. I exercise myself, not only physical workout, a couple hours a day, five. I used to do 7 days, but now I'm up to only 5, 6 days. Matter of fact, I'm soon coming in with a trainer to do weight training twice a week. So basically, if you the same thing for mind, for emotions, I had the EQ, emotional quotient, probably about 60. My IQ was around 70. That's when they tested me in eighth grade. I was retard, okay, by your kind of standard.
Huh.
There's no limit to how far you can develop. It's all a matter of believing in yourself. Like I kept saying, I didn't know shit. I mean, blank. I didn't know any of the garbage of the past. And and what broke me out of this garbage of insanity, I ended up reading a book called. A book was entitled "Crime and Immortality Within the Catholic Church." I was being groomed to become a Franciscan. My sister was the same way. She became a nun, and I did palmistry on her. About 4 years later, I said, "In 6 years, sister, you're going to leave the convent."
Oh,
And I
really?
said, "You're going to have two children that are going to be not your own." And she did that. And not that because I told her, but because it just was everything. There's information in your palms, in your iris, in your facial, in your ears. Every part of your body carries information.
Yeah.
Or like the Indians used to follow the tracks. They knew what kind of animal, what direction were they moving fast, slow, how heavy they were. Everywhere there's information,
I
and
think
everything is information.
I think it's a holographic system.
Yes, it is holographic and basically a kind of a system that you yourself basically are at one with the source and the source is at one with you. But you got to go through the wormhole of stillness. You can enter into it, but you will not create you might say, the fantastic leaps. You can enter it through super saturation. And that takes place at like dance. I love doing disco. I mean, you just go crazy, surrender to the loud music, movement, just expressing yourself in movement, come free form, and basically, and then you go into a bliss. That's why everybody loves doing that kind of stuff. But nowadays, kids instead they're hooked up to their things and they're watching instead of doing, and that's kind of not the way to go. You want to be alive with movement. In the words, you just take a look at the word emotion. Emotion.
Mm.
If you want to and the emotions are nothing but energy in motion, and the energy can be destructive, fear-based, or the energy can be love-based, and then that creates all the serotonin, dopamine that you could ever imagine, and you're blissing out. So is it love or fear? Most people are living in fear because
Right.
they have taken on the vibes of dead food, dead animals, and basically we're slaughtering 70 billion animals yearly. That's a
Wow.
hell of a
And
slaughterhouse, this planet
the
Earth.
mainstream media, the whole fear sells, gets eyeballs, gets attention.
Yeah,
Attention.
so stay out of mass media because main objects is inculcate with you behavior patterns that are intended to enslave you and make you basically robotic, stupid, and basically and full of fear. And listening to the inculcations that teaching you how to behave, which is all pro death oriented, limited lifespan.
Yeah, well, I was really impressed by your analogy with Apple computers, which started as 8-bit and then just doubled and doubled and doubled.
Yeah.
But then you started at an IQ of 70, and like an Apple computer, you just doubled and doubled. I have a question. You mentioned AI and said that now computers outthink
Yes.
humans. But what I've wondered about is the degree to which AI is recycling what's gone
That's
before. I
actually,
think of it. I think of it
yes.
sort of like the Tower of Babel, really. And thinking is one thing, but the human capacity for inspiration, insight, revelation is another matter. I could see the possibility that as it gets
Well, you
more and
got,
more complex, perhaps
yeah.
consciousness integrates into the
Well,
computer in a
these are
way.
very important points that you're making, and I'm going to make a very interesting comment here. First of all, first of all, the computers, how your brain works on a common level of culture and everything is that basically it acts like based on all the sensory data that is coming in and the way you reinterpret it. Based on your history and associations and everything, it's going to determine the kind of reality you're going to experience. And basically, but if you want total knowledge to be involved, this is called limited experience, and that's the computer can compete with the human on that level. But then it comes another quantum level. They are not able to tap into becoming at one with the source. The creator is basically the computer is not does not have consciousness that is able to operate it's got to have a computer which is your biological computer system that is able to connect with the divine. Unless you have a biological computer which is basically which is basically has a life force that is self-healing, self-rebuilding. The computers are not self-rebuilding. You cannot. The human body is. The human body is capable of living forever. It's all a matter of like, and this was shown by Alexis Carrel. It was shown by the researchers. Uh, Child and Huxley, Julian Huxley, the great biologist from University of Chicago and Nobel Prize winner and her child with utilizing a worm. So humans have that kind of potential if they want. But who the hell? Eventually, you get kind of bored, and there's more excitement in the infinite dimensions of consciousness because 3-dimensional world has its own over limit, and it has all kind of everything is information. And eventually, you outdo the third dimensional information system, and you want to go into all kind of other dimensions, and that's becoming at one with Christos energy, and you dive into that, which the computer cannot do. It cannot access the source. The source gives you access to total knowledge. The computers will only always have limited knowledge. So that's where the difference relies on. When you have consciousness and you can connect with the source, which has ability to download in a state of stillness. In a state of stillness for computers, shutting off the electricity and you're dead. There's no more computer. Whereas in a human, when you shut down the sensory data situation, you enter into condition of at one man with the source. In the Bible, it says, "Be still." That was in Psalms 46:10. Be still and know I am God. When you're in a state of that stillness, you you know you will know that you are God. That's why I entered into that state of stillness completely dislocating all my sensory data. And we went from sound of the body, which was the breath sound, it went to the sound of the whole body energy field, which for me it turned out to be a high C note. For others, it's different. But now all of a sudden you disappear and move into the light and you become at one with the source. And then you have access to all that the source provides. And you can hold on to that field as long as you maintain in that stillness. So, like when I was in graduate school, I'd go for. They had me. My psychiatrist. I went to a psychiatrist because I was, crazy. To put it mildly, I had ulcers for 17 years, bleeding ulcers, and all that kind of stuff. At 16, it started. So primarily, like the psychiatrist had me classified catatonic, which meant I avoided society, and because I found stillness was much more entertaining. then most society, I didn't
Right,
have
right.
anybody connected, and they said I was schizophrenic, and basically, well, that means making an appropriate responses to today's society, which was insane. So I
Well,
was doing what the insane society was doing, and I wasn't doing. So
well,
like I lived in another world. And there's a
yeah.
book written called The Outsider. It's all about dark night of the soul, existentialism movement, written by Wilson. It's a fantastic book. That's what got me into levels of awareness and also studying young philosophy. I ended up living,
Young, young
yes,
philosophers, yeah. Um, so one thing that's highlighted just about brought up, but in the early days, it concentrated on the sound of the breath. And I have understood that the breath is a major key and a gateway, and
yeah, it's
somehow
the gateway.
you just knew how to
No, I just it
you were
just
led
happens.
it just
I
happened.
just when I said the sound became more and more amplified. It's in Lithuania. Our king, King Vilnius. No, oh, I can't forget it. I can't remember right now his name.
Vilnius,
But a king over there,
yeah.
he 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 talked about that the sound over there. He says he founded the capital Vilnius. Basically, he says he was at a sound energy field where it sounded like thousands of wolves were hollering in his head.
Wow.
And he says that was the energy field that called him to start building the city of Vilnius. And it's like one of the most unbelievable energy intellectual capitals in the world. Like for based on population size, Lithuania had more scientific papers published than any other country or
I
intellectual papers.
I have read that the highest average IQ of any country is Lithuania.
It could be. I thought there's also a highest rate of suicide and alcoholism,
Oh
but
no.
so the number of people that were coming out that they were the exceptional, because it does build exceptional athletes, exceptional scholars, exceptional breakthrough. Like in 1972, in Science Review, they had a photo of a Lithuanian professor. In 1972, I found one of my key components about cancer, which was the fact that when you're eating, when your body becomes very low enzymes and you're eating cooked food,
Right.
basically it floods the blood with incompletely metabolized food, and
Right.
it shuts down the oxygen transport by 70%.
Oh.
So that would cause asphyxiation. And basically, at that point, at Dr. Uh, Otto Warburg found that, and he won Nobel Prize, the ultimate cause of cancer. He showed that actually as little as 35% drop in oxygen delivery will cause cells to mutate to cancer. And then Midler, LePage, and others basically showed that actually cancer cells act like vacuum cleaners for completely metabolized food, so that
Oh.
oxygen transport could be carried on. And then just stacking up all these
Wow.
dead cancer cells, eventually they become so large in volume, it might take 5, 10, 20 years. Then they start in disabling the function of other metabolic activities, and then you die or you get old. And if you go by way of surgery, radiation, or chemo, then basically your life expectancy, according to Herbert Jones at University of California School of Medicine, Brooklyn, uh, basically he showed that it's 3.5 years if you do medical therapy. It's 12 if you do nothing. So
Oh.
basically, that stuff don't work. It's kind of
Well,
because you're poisoning and not getting at the cause. So basically, that was kind of a little sideway. But basically, when I looked at, they had a photo of this Lithuanian professor. He had his feet on his big desk over there, smoking a cigar. He had over 200 enzyme splitting. He had more uh, enzyme splitting devices so that he could do work on the enzymes directly than anybody else in the world. So, and these were often you see it in a lot of different uh, forms of intellectual media. You saw lot of Lithuanians were outstanding achievers, including myself. I mean, I'm basically a non-entity, but I started the raw enzymatic revolution, basically by discovering the works of Edward Howell, and he was already 92, and I tracked him down. Took 2 years to find him, and then he gave me permission to reprint. But I says that's not enough. I says you gotta answer 20 questions. So he did. And I says, that's not enough either. I says, I got to write an introduction. So I wrote almost half of the book was introduction, catching up. His book, it was at a 500 medical journal references of research with enzymes. I brought that was up to 1939, and I brought it up to 1975.
And what was
Well, his book was his manuscript. It wasn't a book; it was just stapled manuscript, and it was entitled 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 uh, uh, system the food enzymes influenced by influence on digestion and metabolic activities, and basically, and he got the two right, but he didn't understand the immune system yet at that point, and I'm the one who brought it to the immune with more current
and what
research.
was again?
Dr. Edwin Howell,
And what was the book that you wrote?
and then I ended up being renamed, and it was called Food Enzymes for Health and Longevity. He was quite teed off because it didn't fit the scholastic module because I added a lot of artwork because artwork sells. So I was into
Was that
that.
your first book?
No, second book,
What was your first book?
Survival in the 21st Century. Then the second one was Life in the 21st Century. Then that was based on all the experiences of others. And after that, it was called Nutritional Evaluation of Sprouts and Grasses, which I renamed it. And I wrote a book called From Longevity to Physical Immortality. Then the first book actually was called Love Your Body because I saw how everybody hated their body. So it was a summary of what was in survival. So because I needed some cash flow to pay for printing of the survival. So
So that was that first book
yeah,
that kind
that
of
one,
set the stage.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
just to kind of circle back around to your
coming,
beginnings, where you're talking about love, you came out of this environment of fear, and it just, I think a lot about the fact that my parents were in World War II, and so few people that are living in the West, in the United States, have that experience of what it was like to be in war. And when Ukraine was invaded, my mother couldn't sleep for 2 months,
yeah,
and all she would say was, "Oh, all those people, all those people," and that suffering doesn't seem to really get through media to the point that people can empathize
yeah.
and connect
Well,
with the
this is easy
reality
to
of the
this
suffering.
is easy to understand from the point of view, and it's a good point you're making because, like, I'll give you an experience. When I was in displaced people camp around the age of 8, I saw the first movie that involved It involved murder, and I'll tell you, I was so uh, ch- traumatized by that experience. It left a long term impact. Now, when you're getting exposed to over 10,000 murders yearly from both movies, media, said everybody loves that, you become desensitized. And basically, people have been totally desensitized. They don't have a simpatico, they don't have compassion. Although they will express it in certain ways, but they can't really feel it because they have been so inculcated through the media expression, and as a result, they don't feel it. But in the final run, there's even a better step in a relationship. You got to live a life of as being taught by all the masters. See it like in Alcoholics Anonymous. See what if you can make a difference, go out and do it. If there's nothing you can do it, basically step back and see it as being part of a scenario because this is like you said initially, kaleidoscope or a holographic movie set that we're on, and basically it's suffering is something that we all stepped in for. some people are going to hear experience no stuff. They wrote their own scripts. They were their own choreographers of everything that was to happen. So basically, when you can start seeing it with kind of level of basically experiencing, but not traumatizing, because once you traumatize yourself, you shut off your ability to operate your
Right.
prefrontal brain. And all
Right.
of a sudden, all you're doing is basically in the negative emotions, which throws you into non-solution oriented. Everything has a solution. Whenever a trauma occurs, you know what? How the hell I face? I walked off this ridge over there, 6 foot drop over there. The girl kind of walked me off because I let her walk me, and I wouldn't walk over, but she walked me off. I landed on my left leg. I was around the age of 80, around 80, 82. And basically, now I didn't get, I had I asked the question. I'm in excruciating pain. Immediately, I do laying of the hands. So I got it partially solved. I discovered that I have no breaks. Nothing is broken. That was a major step. But I'm in pain beyond belief. So I keep on breathing and working. At the same time, I'm asking, I said, what can I learn from this? And the biggest lesson was recovery from anger. I had a lot of anger
Mm.
management, and when people do something that is bad,
Mm.
for 6 months it took me to heal myself, where I could do again all my yoga postures and everything. That 80 yoga posture set. I I never brought it up to her that what a bitch you're stupid and
Yeah,
everything. No,
not paying attention.
I just let it pass by. And now I just everything that happens, I just take it as what good is it? What can I learn from it? Why did I bring this into my life? Everything is good because we're living in God's neighborhood, which is good, and God is good,
Yes.
and everything is an opportunity to discover some new realities, an
Yes.
opportunity to enter into another level, just like my ability with vision. It has been to me the greatest blessing because I was on an addiction that I was not able to break away, at least at that time. And I was, I don't know, 70 or something like that. And I lost it. I was there, which was, I just saw, for what it was, and I broke the addiction. And right now I'm working on quantum field, kind of clearing up still some of my quantum field garbage, which I'm
Right.
holding on to it for later release on, what an insane individual, in spite of what people say how saintly I am. Far from it. It's we all got certain degree of skeletons, as they
So
say.
would
And
it
it's
be,
basically it's just
Victor,
a time.
would it be fair to say that as your normal vision decreased, your inner vision unfolded?
Oh, outrageous! In my first of all, I developed auditory skills, so my memory increased radically. Right now, I have probably, which I had, hardly could memorize numbers. Now I got over 300, maybe more phone numbers, all kind of numbers. I started remembering people's names. I also started reprogramming my memory in a sense. I stopped belittling it. I said, like I stopped saying, "Oh, I got poor memory for names." I don't
Mm,
say that. Now I'm getting
right.
better and better memory. And instead, I use a little self hypnotism. I start programming my brain and what my capacities. And basically, we're God's in drag. There's no limit to our potential. Everybody has unlimited potential. It's all a matter of your level of belief. Ask and it shall be given. Knock the doors and it'll open. Like, give you an example. I ended up going to Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory for a job. I ended up going to an employment agency. They gave me a list of about 100 jobs. They all sounded boring. Smithsonian sounded interesting. I knew nothing about computers. They scheduled me for a week later for a visit. I ended up reading a Fortran book and as much as I could get. Now, I went in there, I was half an hour late. I ended up believing that I belonged there. I was in there already. And not only was I half an hour late, but my competition was men who knew much more, who come from top schools, top
Right.
10 schools in the country.
Got it.
I ended up getting the job. How?
Nice.
Believe. And the same thing was true on the second. Like my 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 future wife, you know, over there, uh, she one time I was like we had a working relationship for about 12, 15 years, and it was a great working relationship. And I used to kind of, was gentle, kind of a romance, but I was never really heavily approaching her. And so she ended up, I approached her about a relationship and says, what would I want to do with someone who's a hunchback? She called me illiterate hunchback. 5 years later, she's asked me to get married. She says we're good enough together now. Says let's do romance. So we ended up having a wild fling for a couple of years and got married. But whatever I set out years later, I mean, at 80, I envisioned a certain kind of romance coming in. Oh my God, it was the best romance ever in my life. Like all of a sudden, on all the levels, emotional, mental, adventure, life and death. I mean, it was every. I was 80. Shit, guys are going writing their will and death. I don't know. I'm having the best time ever, and I've envisioned that whole thing in a sense, it just happened. I didn't do anything. The other party did everything else. Approached me. I didn't approach her, but she was the one. So life is
Beautiful.
envisioning, believing. It's everything. Like, and when you can live in, just like walking on fire.
Yeah.
How many times? I walked so many times on fire.
Oh, really?
Oh, got 6 times,
Oh,
and then there's you heard of the yellow pages. There was a commercial called "Let Your Fingers Do the Walking." Well, I did the walking on fire with my feet, so I decided to walk with fire on my fingers. So I did it on a red grill, and it sounded like sounded like fried eggs.
oh, no.
I put it in my mouth, scream, ah! 30 seconds later, completely healed. That's how powerful we are. You know, it's believe. But if
Yeah.
I didn't have, then it would all dissolve. But eye is important because eye activates your heart
Yeah.
chakra. Then it, which is according to HeartMath, the Research Institute of the Heart's magnetic field, it goes up by 5, 10,000. I've watched a woman overnight. Overnight, she went into primal scream, the breast cancer that was very large, quite a bit growth. Because she was so angry, she was ready to kill. It was 2 o'clock in the morning here at my household, and basically, I thought the neighbors would call the police.
Oh, boy.
She's doing the primal scream, screaming like I no, yeah. Next day, she asked me. I felt her breast. There's no more, hardly any growth. It was practically healed.
Remarkable.
It's so powerful, this magnetic field, and like I cracked my head tens of thousands of times. Yeah, I am healed. I am healed, and it's gone.
So I want to ask you something specific here because I love the story of the impact of seeing that first movie where there was murder, how
Yes, sir.
traumatic that was, and how desensitized people have
Yep.
become. How, based on your experience of bringing yourself out of that early trauma, what would you say to people about resensitizing themselves, reversing that condition, and
Basically, desensitizing. There's it's called
resensitizing?
no,
I
it's
want to
it's
know.
called it's called baggage. Forget the baggage. You can go to psychiatrists, do all this memory and retracing, do all kind of. Basically, there's a book written by Candace Pert. She was one of the top opiate. She had identified opiate receptive sites. I've listened to her quite a few times, and also her book called called is called uh, Molecules of Emotions. Basically, every emotion generates certain molecules. The molecules they have a tag. It's called protein tagging. That was 1999 Nobel Prize was won by this biologist in protein tagging, showing that there's a barcode, just like when they put all kind of merchandise. It's got a date, it's got time, it's got all kind of information in this
Okay.
barcode. It's a long chain of amino acids. Okay, so everything in your body has these things, and basically, and that includes emotions that are generated, which are generated by your hormonal systems. That represents a summary of experience that is being experienced during that time. And now, so basically, so if you don't pay attention to it, they expire and they disappear out of your conscious. So the whole thing is don't pay attention to your past. You can dwell on it, and if you're wise enough, right now I have no fear of all my past. I can watch all kind of murders. It doesn't bother me one way or another. But at one time, oh my God. But now, basically, I'm viewing an activity over there. I don't have all kind of emotional trauma associated, and that's the way to wipe these emotional garbage. Like, give you an example: schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is nothing but having your blood so overloaded with these molecules of negative emotions that oxygen transport is not taking place. And now you're making ineffective decisions in relationship to the conditioning and inculcation that you received as a robotic human being, part of this insane culture. Okay, so basically the whole idea is don't pay attention. Instead, it's called like Harvard calming breath as an example. You take a deep inhalation, hold it for a count of like, let's say from you say 2001, count it up to 2005, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. Then exhale to 2007. Just have a slow exhalation and take again a rapid inhalation. And do that 4 or 5 times, you wipe out. Now you can do that, or you can. It's the word emotion. In the word emotion, it's that negative emotion is wiped out by any change in sensory data, because when sensory data is operating on your system, then your body pays attention to the sensory data. It doesn't pay attention to the circulatory information, these negative emotional molecules that are circulating. So as the more you don't pay attention, your immune system looks at it. It doesn't have a life tag on it. Boom, it macrophages eats it up. Its garbage becomes part of amino acid dump. It either absorbs the amino acids for recycling or pisses it out through kidneys and defecation. So basically, that's how the human system operates. So you can spend, you know, like one of my friends, $500, everybody in the family paying to the idiot psychiatrist over there. Maybe that's, and they're doing nothing with them. Yeah, I just, like just learned how to do it slightly different by studying psychology, studying person. But I studied it on a quantum level. I took the information that was there and I took it to the next and next and next level. So basically, you can wipe out all these negative feelings. Like I was programmed as an example. Demons were possessing me. I mean, because in the Lithuanian version of Catholicism, all the hell they used to talk about devils and demons, torture, and all that kind of stuff in my childhood story. These elders were telling stories. I would be scared. I would have sleepless nights. In my imagination, my bed was being tossed up and down. Devils were attacking me. I mean, I hardly had any sleep. I mean, I was just beyond insane. Thank God, like I said, I had strong constitution. Then finally, even that's how I ended up having ulcers and one of the many contributors. And basically, so one day after doing veganism and raw foods and stuff like that, I was living at Ann Wiggler's farm. I feared darkness, midnight, Friday the 13th, and I feared also I was drowning in water, so I feared water and swamps and snakes. So you know what the hell I did? I went to a swamp at midnight, full moon, midnight, snakes, went right into the swamp. And I stood there until the fear was gone. Now I don't recommend these kind of approaches, but that I was like one of these people who was extreme, like
But that's unlike that programming condition.
yeah,
We were talking about. I'm hearing you say you did make
distraction.
your breath again, but you also just talked about not paying attention to it
Yeah,
and recreating it, right? So it's really in part being present
because
to now. There's none of that now.
yeah, no, because when you replay it, when you watch it, then you get that same emotional experience, and now your body is getting another trauma signal because your brain doesn't know between imaginary creations and
Right.
real creations. It creates an environment of stress. So the brain is kind of a little stupid on some things until you learn how to program your brain to be able to differentiate. But most people are incapable of that.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and
so
speaking
that's
of
why any distraction, well, like for instance, doing tapping, you can do tapping and say, I am, I love myself unconditionally, even though I'm a stupid idiot and I'm an addict, and then do that a few times, and you're downloading that perfect body, a perfect astral field that is surrounded into your biological field, and before you know it, you're just feeling start good about yourself. So there's a lot of many different ways. Yoga, qigong. I mean, qigong is one of the greatest movements that you can do anytime vertically standing. I do that on a daily basis. Even today, I did that, and in the morning, just tapping down the astral body. Just they
yes.
do it.
Well,
Yeah,
you
just do
told
it
me a
big.
great you told me a great story relates to the swamp story,
Yeah,
which was that you moved home at 40 or 42 and just stayed with your parents until you
I
could
love
leave
them unconditionally.
unconditionally.
Yeah, well,
You
and the reason I love them unconditionally, I understood what a great job they did by creating all these torturous situations, and it was painful to them because they didn't know what the hell they were doing, and basically, and enabled me to be programmed to do what I did with my life. My other three siblings, they're all half dead or dead. I'm the only one that's alive, and I'm the one that was tortured. So
well,
I had a good life. I had what they call early childhood. I was on a cross for about 35, 40 years in torture, and but I learned a lot. Just like the the archbishop of one of the churches in the UK, he came out of one of these uh, terrorist prisons, 5 years of it, and that guy was tortured every day. And for him, it was bliss. So he came out completely forgiven, didn't have any attitude. I mean, he sounded so beautiful, so energized. He was on BBC News for 5 minutes, and he just transcend the whole thing because it's an opportunity that we're given to see how powerful and how divine we are. So when
right.
we can overcome, then we're going to be able to do greater and greater things. And there's no end. And the place that like all of us are is starting to discover, and I kind of started discovering when I was 16, 17, the quantum field and ability how to operate in that system. But it calls for a lot of subtle behavior, including the issue of chastity or tantric sex. A good book that everybody would do well to read. Multiple Orgasm Man. It's completely a different attitude.
By Mount
Getting over, yeah,
Montauk
but touch and
great author.
clearing up your menstrual cycle. So, like my cousin Elvira, she came to Ann Wigmore. She would have a 7 day cycle. Within 6 months, she was down to about 7 hours. She felt so fantastic. Just diet influences. Dr. Thompson did research. Just even vitamin C by taking vitamin C. 100 nurses at the Brooklyn Hospital that did the research. Basically, basically in 1 month, the menstrual cycle padding was reduced by 66%. And women are suffering. The menopause is completely unnecessary. It's all these things that our society has wrongly introduced because we made us debilitated by the kind of diet that we're into, by the lifestyle habits,
Right,
just
right.
everything,
Well,
and a
and
poisonous environment and poisonous thoughts, feelings. So
you're
it's taken time for us to regain our momentum, but there's a huge community that's called Cultural Creatives by Paul that he did the demographics of. And at one time in the 1985 was a minority as compared to what they call moderns and theory and moderns and traditionalists. And basically, now it's the dominant force because more and more people are searching. And you see it in like utilities appliances that are being made available. Raw food appliances are competing like crazy. Stuff that used to cost $2,000, you can get it for $200
and tell
for
me
and less.
the name of the organization with an author named Paul.
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. It's called Cultural Creatives.
Oh, okay. Well, another book that you reminded me of with the story about this priest was the great book by Viktor Frankl,
Oh
Man's
yes,
Search for
yeah,
Meaning. Very much the same.
yes. Search for meaning.
Man's
If you
Search
can
for Meaning.
find meaning in life, you'll find a way to live.
Brilliant, brilliant.
A
Well,
lot of
Victor,
people.
it's your weight coach is going to be here in a
Oh,
second,
then I need to
so I
rest.
think this is a great time to
Thank you very much for.
finish this one up.
Anyways, check out this book
There
on
it is. Lift
Amazon.com.
it a little higher.
Check
Yeah,
it out on Amazon.
there it is. That was a life-changing book for me, I can tell you. And I'm gonna tell you that story in one of our sit downs here when I came across that book and how much it impacted me. And it's truly an honor and a privilege to be here with you all those years later. I came across that book in 1978
Yeah.
and met you in '85. So we're at 40 years plus here, and what a great journey! Yes,
Amazing life. So
and what a
It's
great
amazing,
yeah.
amazing life. And so many of our colleagues are coming together because we're part of that same tribe,
Yeah.
meant to not only to survive the transition into the Aquarian age, but at the same time to make an impact to all the digital media that is now available for us to. For those who are ready, they're going to hear us and they're going to make changes. They're going to take the needed action steps. And those of you who are hearing this for the first time, you also will find that you have been already pre-selected. You're here for a reason. And hopefully this investment with some of the ideas that was part of the presentation is going to lead to ever increasing. Like if we invested 2 hours, it'll give you 2 million hours of new life form because this is a longevity education, longevity and quality of life and
Yes.
happiness and emotional poise. So go for it. Follow and be the greatest that you can ever be because you can do it. All you have to do is believe in yourself and just keep listening to nothing, stillness, and that will talk to you and it'll educate you. You'll have, and just keep asking, Lord, tell me, tell me, I'm listening. Tell me, shut off your media and listen to the inner media. And that's where the action is. So God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Victor.
Thank you,
Thank you
Lord.
so much.